So you might be wondering, what in Final Fantasy XI, after 20 years, could there even be to do? Well, quite a few things, actually. For this particular video, we're going to talk about assuming you stopped playing at the end of Rhapsodies of Vana'diel, which, honestly, they made it seem like it would be the end of the game. They had a beautiful song for us, and you got to essentially meet the goddess and a whole bunch of stuff. But without going too hard onto all of that, we're going to talk about what's happened since, because the game is still actively coming out with plot. Now, at the later half of this video, I'm going to be getting into some heavy spoilers and things that aren't even officially in the game, but are in the game data. So just a fair warning, I will throw another one out before we get too hard into that. But let's talk about what's come out since the end of Rhapsodies of Vana'diel up to now, at the start of 2023. So, a few years ago, when Rhapsodies came to an end, they did add a siren fight, but other than that, it was mostly over. We got Omen first, and that was a really unique endgame content where you would go up various floors and then you would pick directions. And there's a mid boss and a final floor boss, and you could collect all the key items from those guys to get a super boss at the end. And that didn't all come out at once. At first, it just had the mini bosses, and it had the final floor bosses came out later, and then I think the super boss came out after that. And then Dynamis Divergence came out, which was the second reboot. Well, not reboot, but change to the system of Dynamis. And I believe Sandy came out first. But eventually, the 4 starting cities, or the 3 starting cities in Juno, came out for that. And that has 3 tiers of difficulty. And those are very challenging to this day. So, for people who are familiar with gear, artifact gear upgrades are linked to Omen, and relic gear upgrades are linked to Dynamis Divergence. And they all also have their own unique gear and crafts, etc., etc. But then you kind of even figured things would be done for a little while. There's UNMs that came out and a whole bunch of other little small things. But nothing too serious until a very unknown thing happened in 2020. And lots of people were finding themselves online, including Final Fantasy XI. And they decided to make another plot content. And they called that the Voracious Resurgence. Now, we didn't get a real taste of any of that till many months later. But eventually, we did get to try that out. And at first, it made no sense to anybody. It was very confusing. It seemed like side stories left kind of unfinished touch-ups. But it rolls into a very complex storyline. That being said, there's also 2 additional contents that have come out since the announcement of the Voracious Resurgence, and that would be Odyssey and Sortie. Now, Odyssey follows the map of the Walk of Echoes, for people who are familiar with Wings of the Goddess content. But they randomized the monsters, and there's a whole new aggro rules, everything there, aggro sight. And there's some true sight and true sound beastmen that you can't even target until these little halo Guivrays get taken out. And then they all become targetable. But it's pretty brutal content. It's a lot of fun. You can make a lot of money in it. I've talked about it in other videos. And then Sortie recently came out at the end of 2022. And that's also still, I'd say that's actively still being updated. Odyssey received its last update in December. And now, Sortie is essentially for upgrading the Empyrean gear set up to the +3 119 final state. So they've made ways to upgrade all the job-specific gear up to a very final state. And then they've even introduced a new legendary weapon line. Now, they haven't finished it yet, but there is one upgrade so far, and that's all linked to Sortie as well. And the Voracious Resurgence mission line. I also would say that Sortie requires the Seekers of Adeline expansion completed, and no endgame required that expansion to be done, to my awareness, yet. So that was nice that they added that. But it started off talking to Gumba, and then eventually going through all the cities. And I'm not going to try to spoil every little detail of the Voracious Resurgence for everybody. But we are here to talk about what I think is to come in the future and some of those things. And that's going to lead to some heavy spoilers. So those are all the things that have come out so far. This is where we're going to talk about some of the heavier spoiler stuff. So there's your warning. But essentially, how do I say this? I stumbled upon something in the data, and we're just going to switch over to my other screen, just so I could show it to you. And then we'll talk about it. Hi, Smaller Shuko here. So, yeah. This is Behemoth. Or Bahamut, if I know how you pronounce it. Don't kill me. I'm really terrible at pronunciations. But he looks different. It's a reskin. And this was not in the data until the December update. So for people who are familiar with the Voracious Resurgence storyline, I suspect that this is Chaos, the terrestrial avatar. Now, he has a full animation set just like Bahamut does. And unfortunately, I can't link it with the particle effects of Mega Flare and everything else in this. I'm using a model viewer called Noesis. There's a bunch of model viewers that'll work, Altana View and many others. I'll try to provide some of the links to those in the description. But yeah, he has a whole set, and he's not out yet in the game. But long story short, he is going to be coming out for us to fight, I'd imagine, very soon. And a couple suspicions to that, I have to go to some other data. So here's one of our favorite hero / villain question marks that you encounter. I won't get too much into him. I want to move to this model. So we have an orc here, but his color scheme is unique. And I want you to take note of the gold and the purple going on there. Look familiar? And then a Akwadov. Again, pronunciations, but you know. Gold and purple. Igudo. Now, they don't wear a lot of clothes, but a little bit they wear, the beads and the feet and everything. Gold and purple. So, yeah. That's a theme that kind of reminds me of this person here. Good old Bahamut. So, essentially, if you wanted to look at this yourself, you'd have to load up your Final Fantasy XI install data and go to ROM 0, well, for the American client anyway, ROM 0, 376 folder, 9.dat. And there's also, I believe it's in 5. Well, no, it's not 5. Is it 6? Oh, yes. 6 DAT is also a moving animation for him. So I'm assuming that there'll be cutscenes with him moving across the map. Or they just needed both for the battle for some reason. I don't know. But I know that there's a lot of data related to him in the game. And that's something that I wanted to talk about. So, for those that really don't want to get spoiled, but somehow you made it this far, I put out a final warning because I'm going to talk about the plot and what I think's coming for 2023. Now, so far, the Voracious Resurgence has been a focus on eggs. And they're called World Eater eggs. And they were buried. I guess the best way to describe them, if you're familiar with the Harry Potter lore, is they're like Horcruxes, like Voldemort's Horcruxes that he buried around. And unless they all get killed, he can revive through one of them. And so Chaos, a terrestrial avatar, I'm guessing essentially the Bahamut ancestor, put a whole bunch of these around, and he was defeated by the Beastmen, all working together, but knew that he could return because his eggs were spread all across the world of Anadiel. Now, a lot of the plot, without getting into every single detail, is involved in trying to find these eggs and destroy them before Chaos awakens. But they do show various images, artwork that has been designed for the story plot, because I imagine they can't afford to do full cutscenes for everything, especially some of the really cool ideas that they talk about in the plot. But by the artwork that they show too, I suspect, and other Final Fantasy lore, I highly suspect this Bahamut reskin that just came out in the December patch but isn't out in the game yet is Chaos. But there's also another antagonist in this plot, the Maelstrom Mage, a little Taru that wanted to get godlike, unique magic power over memories. And he was killed, I believe, or, destroyed by the Mages of Windurst, but also has extreme power. So, you got Chaos, and you got him in essentially Hell, or Valhalla, where Odin reigns, and they're causing a whole bunch of problems. And the Maelstrom Mage is even reviving people from the dead and bringing them back to the living world to cause the problems. And they all usually have his mark. And that is a whole, if you've seen my Awoken series on YouTube, I've fought almost all of them. Well, I fought all of them, but I've made videos for almost all of the current existing ones. But they all have his mark. And at first, nobody was 100% sure what was going on, but they knew there was some plot lore there linked. But time has gone on. And essentially, you're trying to upgrade a weapon that's capable of hurting Chaos. Even the relic Great Katana chipped and broke trying to attack an egg. And so they're saying you're going to need a more powerful weapon for this, is kind of the hint of the lore. And so they have you start working on a prime weapon, which looks like a darkened relic weapon. At first it doesn't even look like that, but then later it does. If you've seen some of my videos, you'll see me with like a darkened Aegis, and that's the prime shield upgraded to stage 2. Now, with the Maelstrom Mage in Valhalla raising people from the dead, and Chaos resurrection being almost happening a couple times, Odin has shut down the path to the Galka and their resurrection and reincarnation that they've been doing for, I don't know, thousands of years or however long they've been doing it. And that has essentially led to a big problem in Vana'diel, as Chaos may awaken, the Maelstrom Mage is coming out and sending undead armies, Odin's in danger, and Odin has demons that serve him. And you interact with a lot of them in this story plot as well. And you meet a very powerful one that you've actually already met in the Seekers of Adeline plotline, the Master. But you meet an alternative form. And so, I don't want to get into every single little weed of it, but I suspect that since we're seeing this chaos model, that there's going to be battle content with the Beastmen that you've seen and the chaos model, and essentially maybe even the Maelstrom Mage later as a final boss. But we don't have his data yet. And I think that we'll fight these guys, possibly in a mission, possibly in raid content, but I think we're going to fight them and his lesser Beastmen servants. So that's essentially what I wanted to talk about with that. But the other thing I wanted to bring up is recently at the New Year's announcement, the official website talked about how there's still one more battle content to come. So he may be linked to that as well. There is a zone data in this update. It's actually 2.dat that just has the Moogles and the Zone Master and nothing else in it. So I would suspect that we're in for a treat, hopefully. I don't know if it's going to be like a whole zone, though. It's probably just going to be a battlefield thing. But I'm excited regardless. Swordy, as interesting as it could be, was definitely unique, even though it reused the map. And there's a lot of new things to do in Final Fantasy. If you stop playing at the end of Rhapsodies, oh man, is there a lot of endgame. And you can group up with a couple friends and do most of it. So that is pretty much going to conclude it. I wanted to try to have a more fun short video. Well, short for me. And what still is out, or what has come since the end or the original end of Final Fantasy XI, and what is still coming out, what I suspect we're going to see coming out early 2023. And if you guys have anything you think I missed or want to hear about more, let me know. All right, thank you so much, everybody, and take care.